I want to talk with you today about something that I think is really important for almost all men. That's the ability to say no. The ability to say no. Men do pretty well with saying no at work sometimes. They do pretty well saying no with friends, when they're playing together, when they're doing this and that. But the one place where men have a hard time saying no is in relationships with women. Somehow we fall apart at that point in time. And man, there is no worse time that I've seen over the years where men have a hard time saying no than in divorce. I've seen it over and over again. In divorce, when men, uh, things are awful, things are terrible, things are falling apart. And men have this sense of wanting to save the day sometimes. They want to come in and say, well, I'll give her more than half, and I'll make sure she gets the best car. And it's like they're saving the day. They come in and save the day, and they can't say no at that point. So it's something that we as men need to keep an eye on, this whole idea about saving the day and not saying no. Men have a long history of this saving the day thing. Think about it, jumping on a grenade. I mean, how many times have you heard of a guy that jumps on a grenade for his buddies? And in order to save the day like that, that's got to be something that's not only socialized, but it's got to be at least partly biological, because it overrides the whole survival instinct. It's that strong where it overrides the survival instinct. So this saving the day thing in men is something that's probably socialized, but I think it's also biological in some ways, which makes it even more important that we have a look at it and we deal with it and we become conscious of it, of what we're doing. And it's not just jumping on a grenade. It's like the icy pond when the dog or the kid falls into the ice in the icy pond. Who is it that goes and saves that kid or that dog? Every time I've seen it, it's been a man. It's been the man who goes. I don't see too many women jumping into the icy water, pulling something out. It's in our blood. It's in what we do. You can even look at fixing a tire. How many times have you seen the woman pull over to the side, and it's the guy who pulls over to help her fix a tire? Have you ever seen a man being helped by a woman who's pulled over to help him fix a tire? Probably not. So there's something inside us, and of course, it's gynocentrism is a part of all of this. But I think it goes farther than that. I think it's gynocentrism, and it's our biological piece that's driving us to take care of. I mean, it's in all the movie scripts. Just about every movie you've ever seen, it's men saving the day, men not saying no. Because if you save the day, you can't say no. It's all yeses, right? Every movie script is about some man who is saving the day, saving some woman or child from something. And that pulls the whole script the whole time. Video games, gosh, it's almost the same thing. That men are there to save the day. We want to do this. We want to save the day. We want to make it better. We want to save the Zelda. We want to do this. We want to do that. And it's all in our psyche. We want to save this day, and it's harder than to say no. Now, it's not just movie scripts and video games. Think about it. Congress. All the men in Congress, they want to save the day. Save the day for women. Think about it. VAWA, what's that about? That's about our male legislators going in and wanting to save the day for women while throwing men under the bus. Because there's almost as many men who are victims of domestic violence, but they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about saving the woman who's fallen into the ice. Forget the guys. So that's just one example of our legislature where it happens all the time. But then there's the educational system where, it's like we've filled it with women, and the higher education now is filled with academics who are afraid to say no to gender studies. They simply can't say no. They want to save the day. Oh, no one will challenge them. No one will say, that's not really right. You need to prove that. So it's the same thing. The academics are saving the day. And in the media, you see the same thing, with the idea of men needing to save the day all the time, in and out, every place you look. And of course, it boils down to the same thing in our relationships. In our relationships, when we feel like we need to save the day, whether it was mom when you were a little guy and she dropped something all over the floor, the eggs all over the floor, and you ran in to help her. You're going to help her save the day, right? I mean, this thing starts early. until it's later with our spouse, and she says, "Oh, I need the trash taken out." I can get it. I can get it. You drop everything and you'll do it, right? You're going to save the day. As men, we need to learn how to start saying no, and it's really hard in relationship. Why? Because for thousands of years, relationships have been built to make women the quartermasters. They're the ones that say, we need this supply, we need that supply, and we need this. And it's the guy's job to go and get that. It's his job to supply the quartermaster with the needed items, right? But it's not his job to say, well, we need this and we need that. So it's a one flow, it's a one-way valve of the woman saying, I need, and the man saying, okay, I'll get it. And rarely is he able to say no to that, because that's the way relationships work. She asks for something and he gets it. Now, it was a little different in the 50s, when men were able to say no at a higher rate. I watched my father and my friends' fathers say no to their wives. No, we're not going to buy that plastic coffee table now. We can't afford it. I've saw this over and over again. Now, if you really want that plastic coffee table, honey, let's start saving for it. And of course, the national debt at that time was tiny in comparison to what it is now. Because what? Because men were saying no. Men were saying, no, we're not going to buy that today. We don't need a plastic coffee table. We can save for it if it's something you really, really want. But no. Now, since then, since my father's day, and all the fathers I knew, who were admired and respected, by the way, since that time, what has happened? What's happened has been that men have been degraded. Men have been called names like pigs. They've faced male bashing in the media, where they're these terrible people and don't know anything about buying. Oh gracious! So in the media, in every place you look, in relationships, men are thought of as less than. Now, think about it. Relationships are a very, very tender and sensitive kind of thing, where if it swings one way or the other, it can have an impact for years. And now we have women who think that they have been oppressed, and the men have done it, and that they deserve to have it all, just like he did. What's that going to do to men's capacity to say no? If he says no, then he's just an asshole. He's just trying to keep me from getting what I want. You see how it's working? It's crazy. And so what do? We get a bigger national debt. We get lots and lots of plastic coffee tables. And men are stuck in the position of where they're shamed if they say no. There's something wrong with him if he says no. Whereas before, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, it was like he was respected and admired for his capacity to discern what needed to be bought and what didn't. And I can remember my mother and father would discuss, okay, we need this. Well, let's prioritize. Let's get this, this, and this. Very different from today's world, where it's just a credit card and there's no one saying no. So, in some ways it's a weird thing, because domestic violence these days, they talk about domestic violence as when men keep women from certain people and men withhold things like money. But wait a minute, after people get married, I've seen it over and over again. What happens? The man loses his friends. She says, no, that's I want you to be with the family now. I want you to be with my friends, with blah 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 blah. He loses his friends over 5 to 10 years, so that he ends up without his friends. As men, we need to start to say no to that. We need to say, no, Thursday nights is my night to be with my friends. Period. The end. No, I'm not going to just relate to you. That's domestic violence. Literally, if they say it's domestic violence against the woman, it's certainly domestic violence against men if you try and legislate who his friends can and can't be. So that's just one more reason why men need to say no. Gracious goodness. So what can men do about this? The thing you can do is just become aware of the fact that it's hard to say no, and the things that are keeping you from saying no, and start practicing a little bit. Practice here and there, saying no to things. Get a sense of how it works. Find a friend, a guy friend, who really has an easy time saying no, and get him to help you learn how to do this better and better. Because it's a skill. It's a skill. God, I remember this one guy. I love this guy. But he used to say no to his wife whenever he wanted to, but he would always make it hilarious. He'd make it so funny that she would get so tickled and laugh so hard that she couldn't even say, you can't say no to me, because he was able to use his humor, his strength in humor, to be able to say no and to set limits. That's the kind of thing we all need to learn how to do. Sometimes it's easier to start with saying, my preference is XYZ. I have a preference for this or that. Rather than saying no, start with a preference, because it's very difficult for anyone to shame a preference. I guess they may be able to, but give it a try anyway and see what happens. So those are just a couple of ideas about ways to say no, because men really need to start saying no. Now, the MGTOW people have succeeded in saying no. They say no to everything, and bless their hearts, they're the pioneers. They're out there saying no to everything, and we can learn from them. Find a MGTOW guy. Get him to help you learn how to say no, because that's something as men we need to do. And really, it's to women's benefit that men are able to say no, because you cannot have a balance in a relationship if the men are not able to say no, and only women can say, no, that's not what I want. You got to have both. Like Warren Farrell says, you got to have both sides of the boat rowing, not just one side. If one side rows, you go in frickin' circles. Anyway, men are good when they say no, and they're even good if they have a hard time saying no. Men are good. So come visit me on Patreon. I could use your support there. And, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And we'll see you.